Morning guys, this is John Graham,
Nick
Day from 80% Off-Road. Today we're going to be doing one of our swing out tire carriers on this nice GX460. So we're going to do a tutorial so you guys can follow along and get a better idea for install.
So the first step to doing the swing out install is measuring the deck of your bumper from the ground. And then write it down.
So for example, what do we got here? What's the measurement?
28 1/8. And just save that for later. So after you measure the deck height, you can start taking the plastic bumper off. And on these 460s, it's all Torx. Or not all, but T30. I'm gonna ratchet with a 10 mil and a flathead. We're gonna go ahead and open up. Pop this guy out. It's kind of tough. Ooh, sounds scary too. This guy pops right out. Ooh. Ooh. Comes right over the gas strut. Put that off to the side. Then you can take all these guys out. And also, don't forget to pop these little side guys out first. Those are kind of tough to not break.
So I get the plastic bumper off. We got 4 on each side and the wheel wells. There's 6 on the bottom. And then there's 5 right up top. And then don't forget to take these little side pieces out right here. Little clips.
Too, it's nice to unclip this light and the sensors. They're both kind of right in this area. But this is only if you've already cut your bumper. If you haven't cut your bumper, you got to start pulling it off first. So we'll do it that way. Pull that out over the little tabby right there, and then we'll take our flathead screwdriver and just kind of start popping this out. It feels pretty scary, but you just gotta take your time. There it is. It sounds horrifying, but it's not. And then just kind of work it on out. Kind of work that up off the clip. Like that. And then pop straight out. Pull this lip out. Then just start working it. Ouch. You just pull it straight back. Okay, so we're under the car. The plug is normally hidden right up here. And I used my pliers to pop this out. And then after that, you can pull that right apart. And there's one on each side. So we're gonna go over here to right here and do the same thing. Cool. Obviously, once you've taken all the bolts out and unclipped your plugs on either side, you can just pull the bumper off. And as long as you got all the clips out, it just slides right off. And then we hit John with it. And then here's your new work area. Now I'll go ahead and close the door, and then we're gonna start cleaning up this side of the frame. Make sure you wear at least your safety squints. On these GX460s is just to be safe, you want to get this little wire out of the way, or you should at least. Just get this out of the way so you don't accidentally grind it. So you just take pliers, squeeze this little guy, pull it out, and put it on top. That way you don't accidentally hit it with the grinder. So once you've gotten this all clean, it's time to set up the welder already. Your bell-shaped cutout piece for 5th gens and 460s, or your 3-inch regular square base plate. These guys just fit right there. Next is, if your vehicle kit came with one of these gussets, I like to just tack that on first. Helps you set the depth. Stick that right there. First off, the first thing we did was measure the deck height, and that's obviously dependent on you and your vehicle, but we always add 3 1/4, and that gives you the height for the top of your bracket. So take your deck height, add 3 1/4, and we've already tacked ours on, but that gives us, in this case, 31 3/8. 31 3/8. That's all you need. So tack your bracket on at the new number that you get, and then we like to throw the swing out on real quick and make sure everything looks good. So that's what we're gonna do next. And for reference, I like to put the bolt in the bracket, and you just want it to be level with, I guess, the vehicle, but so now we're gonna test fit the swing on the bracket before we full weld it. So you're just gonna take the nuts off that are already installed. So you just have your bolt and your spacer. We're gonna go over there and test fit it. Make sure you have the bracket tacked on pretty good. Oh, we're gonna have to move that ladder. Cool. So we removed the ladder because it interfered with the swing out. And now we have the swing out in. And one important part of the swing out install is, let's say your bracket isn't perfect, like perfectly angled. You need to make sure the swing out is just barely up over level. Just barely up over level is better than flat or down. And when you tighten this bolt, it tends to suck it up a little bit. But you can see right now, it's perfect, just barely over level. So the gap over here is just barely more than it is over here. And then we can come around, and this is about where you want your swing out to sit. Straight, even with the frame, maybe like a little bit further in. So this kind of fitment is what you're looking for. If you don't have that, you can tilt your bracket back a little more, or if it's too close, you tilt it down. But ours is perfect, so we're gonna go ahead and fully weld it. Well, take the swing off, fully weld it, put the swing back on, just like this. See in a bit. Sweet. So we fully welded our swing out bracket, reinstalled the swing. It's leveled properly again. So the next step is to put this frame plate on for the landing side. Basically, just close your swing all the way. That's where it hits the tailgate. And we're just gonna mark just under, kind of lined up with the end of the swing, and you can see there's a hole on this side anyways. So just mark that out a little bit. Paint pen is terrible. So we're gonna clean that and weld it. Sweet. So next we need the 4 small parts, the square tube, the square cap, the round tube, and the latch catch, and we'll get those right now. Get that guy. This guy. That guy. But more specifically, we just need this right now. So we have our plate welded on the frame where the landing is approximately. And we also have the swing closed with about, I don't know, 3/4 inch gap here. And again, you're looking for it to be straight parallel with the frame. But the next step is to grab your square tube, get under here. I'm not gonna be able to get that. And you wanna see how to cut this. So we're gonna mark on this side, the frame cut. This pen is awful in the top cut. And we're gonna go cut those and see how it works out. So for this one, I'm using my Portaband, which is the preferred method, but you can also do this with a grinder. Safety first. Make sure you always cut towards your hands. Tube. Now it fits properly. So this process is kind of weird. So you start, drop your pin. I think the swing moved a little bit, but doesn't matter yet. Flat spot on the tube against your square tube. And you want about a 1/2 inch. Yeah, probably about a 1/2 inch. But you're just using this for now to tack the square tube. The square tube gets tacked on first. Make sure it's nice and level. So we're gonna tack the square tube on. Make sure it stays good and level. But go ahead and tack it to the point where it won't move. So then we're gonna take our top plate and just throw that on there. You can see there's still about almost 3/8 of gap, which accounts for the tire weight and then your clamp. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and tack that on. Swing back up, and you want to open your latch, but latch it again. And then this one you kind of got to mess with. And generally, you want your little U-bolt catch to be about level with the top. That's pretty much perfect. So we're gonna adjust the U-bolt up a little bit. That's too high. Oh, too low again. Cool. So yeah, level with the top, U-bolt centered. So we're gonna go ahead and tack the catch onto the square tube. So the catch is tacked. So now this is one of the most important parts if you want your swing out to work right and actually clamp down. You can take a look at it from the side, from this side or that side. This U-bolt angle like that, not gonna work. Even out like that, not so much. It needs to be just about perfectly straight. So what I do is I go ahead and tighten up the U-bolt even a little bit more. That way it's a little more accurate. Tighten that up. And then just make sure your U-bolt is nice and parallel to just about everything else. And then you take your round tube, slide it in there, tack it on. And there you go. Now everything will work perfectly. And when you tighten the latch down, it keeps everything sucked down and square. And there's no weird load on anything. So that's the only part that's really requires extra attention, but that's it. So the reason we space the landing down from the swing out is to make sure, especially on 460s and 470s, that your door doesn't hit this. So you should probably make sure your door doesn't hit the landing before you fully weld this. But ours clears, so we're gonna go ahead and fully weld it. And then that's pretty much it. After that, we paint all that stuff and we'll show you how to cut the holes in the bumper. So your finished bracket should look a little bit something like that, hopefully. And again, obviously you want to make sure you can open and close your door, because that's sort of important. Plenty of space on this one. Sometimes they get a little close. And that's it. And like we had mentioned before, when you're doing these, you want to make sure you got about a 1/2 inch of space, 3/8 to 1/2 inch of space between your completed landing bracket and your swing out, because your tire is going to push down on it, and then you still want there to be a little bit of space for your latch. That way it's got a little spring, and when you tighten it, it really sucks it down. But we'll go over that again later when it's all finished. Cool. So we took everything apart, took the swing out back off, took the tire off, obviously. Started painting raw steel, and now we're going to show you how to mark out the holes to cut in your bumper. So you want to have the door open, and you use the bumper bolt holes to orient yourself for the cut. So I take a ruler and a tape measure. Okay, so I'm 1.5 inches over from that hole, so then I can go over to the bumper, find that hole on the bumper, which is right here. Use my ruler again, use the tape measure, 1.5 inches, so I'll mark right there. And then that's kind of the basic process. Mark that. We're going to see. Add 3 inches. That's about 6 1/4. Now we're just gonna finish out this template, kinda. Obviously, I'll cut it better than I drew it. There we go. Come way down to about there. Now we're going to move on to the bracket side, which is a little tougher on the GX460s, especially because it ends up going through the taillight. But the process is the same. Close that door. Your bumper bolt is right there. So we're going to measure over 6 3/4. Back to the bumper. Find your bumper bolt hole, which is right there. And then you mark, and it ends up right on this spine. So we'll just put that line right there. Now we're gonna go measure the height. And I usually cut a little bit higher. So you can see that this is 13. So I'll cut it at say 12.5, just so there's a little bit more room above the bracket, because this isn't exact. So like I said, this is 13. We're gonna cut it a 1/2 inch higher than that at 12.5. And that 12.5 is from the top of the bumper. You just try to be pretty accurate. And you can see that ends up right in the middle of your lens. Fortunately, if you're careful, you can put this back in and still have your reverse light on these 460s. And then when you come down, you want to come down about a 1/2 inch past this flat deck surface. So we're going to keep going a little bit further to about right there. Then come over, and this hole should be about 4 inches wide, which is almost the same as the taillight. So yeah, it's just about to the end of the taillight. So you can try to cut it there, but these things are pretty fragile. So we'll try it, but usually it doesn't work out so good. And try to use a marker that's not super permanent. And that's it. So we're gonna cut these holes out and then come back. So our bumper holes are all cut and edge trimmed. As such. Like I said, the taillight makes it a little tougher, but we're about ready to throw it back on. So, might need a little bit of a hand. And if you cut it right, pops right on. It's dirty. Pop all the clips back in. And on other vehicles where the foam is not attached to the bumper, make sure you cut the foam and put it back in. Cool. So we're gonna put all the bolts back in, plug the lights and sensors back in, and put the swing back on. We have the bumper back on, all the bolts, clips, the lights and sensors are plugged in. So this is what it should look like. And we're about ready to throw the swing back in. Make sure you retain this spacer. Right in there. Got the bolt. There's swing out in there. Bolt. And on final assembly, we use the Stover lock nut. We didn't use this when we were doing mock-up. We just used the jam nut that's provided. But you use the Stover and only the Stover on final assembly. That Milwaukee impact isn't really doing it. Sorry, Milwaukee guys. Cool. Now we're ready to throw the tire on it. Actually, before that, we'll throw the license plate on it, which the top 2 holes need to be drilled out to 3/8. These guys. Don't go too crazy on these, but you can go pretty tight. Ooh. Now we're ready to put the tire on. Make sure you line up that logo. Sorta. Then throw the lug nuts back on. We provide standard 19mm lug nuts with every swing out, but some wheels do need the spline type. Now all we gotta do is adjust the swing out latch. So for the swing out latch, it's kind of personal preference, but you want it to be firmer rather than softer, like everything else. Should take a little bit of grunt to get it tight. I'm gonna go a little bit tighter. That's pretty good. And then you tighten your top nuts and then the bottoms. And then you tighten the jam nuts over on the heims and you're done. That's it. Over time, your latch may loosen up just due to external forces. So the process for that is loosen the top, turn the bottom one down, which is tightening, and then just tighten your middle nuts down a little bit more. And this is all just by feel. Like right now it's pretty tight, but that's about right. So just be sure to check it every 6 months. Cool. So we're gonna show you right now our swing out's sitting a little bit low. So we're gonna take the tire off and adjust it a little higher. And part of the reason that we use heims, there's actually a few reasons, but one of them is for this purpose. It's really easy to weld these, and when you weld stuff, everything tends to move around a little bit, so it's nice to be able to just, there you go, now it sits a little higher. The other reason is so we have a failure point, a designated failure point, because we've been wheeling with our buddies who have these and they hit them real hard. And we don't want to bend your frame, we don't want to bend your brackets. So it's nice to have something that gives a little bit. And also these are completely replaceable very easily, because no matter what material or where it comes from, everything over time stretches out or moves or gets bent or hit or whatever. So it's really nice to be able to replace your hinge system cheaply and easily, or adjust it easily, like we're doing now. Because now it's too far. So now it's too far over. So instead of turning the bottom one out, I'm gonna turn the top one in. Completely adjustable. There we go. My bad. Make sure not to lose that spacer. Oh. Okay. There it is. And there it is. We came up a little bit and it still lines up perfectly. So, like you just saw, we turned the upper heim in one to raise the end of the swing. And before we had the tire on it, there was a good 3/4 inch of space. Put the tire on it. That's the perfect amount of gap, unlatched with a tire on it. So now, super sturdy. And then when you unlatch it, pops up, in, out, gone. So one of the last steps is tightening the jam nuts for the heims. And one thing you want to do is make sure the heims are level, because if they're all crooked, it'll drag on the bracket and add resistance, which is not ideal. So you can use a punch on the top one to keep it from rotating in, and I use an adjustable wrench on the bottom to keep it from rotating. Get them pretty tight.